We spend all kinds of time doing glute bridges, squats, deadlifts, all these hip extension exercises to strengthen the muscles behind your hip and promote extension. Hip extension is surely a really important part of movement, but hip flexion is important as well. To balance out all of that active hip extension training, we want to have part of our program be devoted to hip flexion and strengthening the muscles that bring your hip into a flex position. Standing hip flexor raises are a very basic progression from single leg stance, which you can see that video here, but actively, repetitively getting up into the hip greater than 90 degrees flexion position. When you get your hip above 90 degrees, that tends to work a muscle called iliopsoas. Iliopsoas is really two muscles. I have the psoas major, which is the tenderloin, attaching from my lumbar vertebrae going down crossing the hip. I have my iliacus, which is on the underside of the ilium bone of the pelvis. Those two muscles become one, called the iliopsoas, attaches to the inside of the femur. It's something called the lesser trochanter. But what those muscles do is they pull the hip into flexion and a little bit of external rotation, a little bit of adduction. But they're really important muscles. We think about a lot of activity athletically as occurring in hip extension, propelling yourself forward while running, coming up and jumping, extending the hips actively. But if you want to sprint really fast, you have to be able to actively flex the hip powerfully and bring that knee out in front of the body. Also, if we want to be able to squat into really deep ranges, I have to have a strong enough hip flexor to pull my hip into a deep, fully flexed position without losing my the position of my lower back. So I have to have active strength in hip flexion to maintain those bottom positions. So that's what this exercise is all about. It's very, very simple. What I want to do is take my hip in a standing position from extension into flexion through a full range of motion. So I stand on one leg. I want to make sure I'm balanced side to side. I'm not kicking my hip out to the side or overcompensating, leaning over. I want to stand up nice and tall, keep a good arch on my stance leg, all the single leg stance things we talked about. But I'm going to go from a fully extended hip position with my glute contracted, flexed, up into a fully flexed position with the knee, again, above the hip. So hip flexed greater than 90 degrees. And I want to do this repetitively until I start to feel fatigue on the front inside of my hip. Again, the inside is the iliopsoas. The outside tends to be a muscle called TFL that we often use to substitute for iliopsoas in hip flexion. So I want to make sure I'm balanced, standing up nice and tall. You can put your hand on something if you need a little bit of support. But we're doing full hip extension to full hip flexion. And you're going to do that until you get fatigued. It should take anywhere from 10 to 20 reps. And this is one where once you have the strength to do this for 15, 20 reps, no problem with just the weight of your leg, you can add resistance. There are products called the monkey foot that attach a dumbbell. You can use a floss band to tape it. I don't have dumbbells at home, so I can't demonstrate that right now. But active body weight, hip flexion, put it into your warm-up, start to work on strengthening your hip flexors, and you will reap the benefits. So leave a comment, let me know how it goes. See you next time.